Thanks so much, Renai. It's really, really lovely. Really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Yeah, we work together so closely, so that means a lot. I really, appreciate that. And I'll just start in a way by saying how lovely it is to be here. I've gradually been sort of fading out into the background, but popping into Brixton over the last year. And in a way, I always leave Brixton in a way missing all of you. As it's been here for 7 years now. And there's a lot of connections, a lot of friendships here. So I feel very pleased to be back, and I will come back again. This won't be the last you see of me, but just a bit less often. So really lovely to be here, and really lovely to be handing over to Prajangosha. I'll say a bit more, but I couldn't have been handing on to a better person. I think it's been lovely, really connecting with Prajangosha over the last year. We've been sort of working together closely. In particular delight, I must say, to have Paramabandhu here. It's quite hard to get Paramabandhu. He's one of the busiest men I know. So rather fortuitous that he was available to lead the Sangha. It's really fitting. So particularly appreciate having Paramabandhu here as well. So I'm going to sort of, so it's a personal talk, but in a way, I'm going to talk about archetypes. I can't sort of talk about myself without talking about some archetypes, because that's just how I kind of work. My name, the second part of my name, Naga, means serpent or dragon, but particularly that dwell in the depths. So I'm often very stirred by the depths in a way, and so I can't but help talk in archetypal terms when I talk about myself. So in a way, this talk is, if I was to give it a title, it would be the 3 archetypes of my chairship, which is, in a way, something that's been going around for me in terms of personal reflections over the last weeks and months. But I also just want to mark, or in a way, reference it or connect it back to Dharma Day as well. So we are here to celebrate. It's not just about celebrating me or Prajangosha, but it is celebrating that moment in time where the Dharma was transmitted. So I felt like I really do have to embed it in that context. And as Paramabandhu said so well, that moment when the Buddha communicated the Dharma to Kandanya, in a way he started, at that moment the Dharma jewel was born. So there was already the Buddha jewel, but the Dharma jewel was born, and also the Sangha jewel as well, because that's when, particularly the Sangha in terms of the enlightened disciples was formed, because suddenly there was 2 enlightened beings, and quickly 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. So it's in a way, that was the start of a lineage, as Paramabandhu was saying, that comes down to where we are today. And what happens after that story is that the Buddha leaves the 5 ascetics, and then he goes off wandering, and they presumably go their separate ways. But you have then the Buddha, he wanders around, and he sort of accrues disciples. He firstly encounters a young man called Yasa, who is actually a hedonist. He's a Paramabandhu likes the story, but he's one who he has this big, massive party, and he wakes up in the night to find, what it's like in an after party, there's mess everywhere, and there's bottles, and there's people lying around with drool caked to their face and stuff. And he's horrified by this image. After all this fun, he sort of has this come down and runs out saying, the horror, and runs out into the night and encounters the Buddha. And they have a conversation, and presumably the Buddha sort of explains to him where real joy can be found, and he pledges himself to the Buddha. And then Yasa's family come looking for him, and they meet the Buddha, and they convert to the Buddha as well. And this goes on. The Buddha encounters more and more people pledge themselves as a follower of the Buddha. And then he encounters these fire-worshipping, they're called matted-haired ascetics, so these big tribes of spiritual practitioners who I imagine the sort of wild figures, they are matted-haired, and they're probably dirty and not wearing much, and they worship this fire in these kind of crucibles of fire. And the Buddha converts them by showcasing his great spiritual abilities, his great spiritual talents. It actually says that he does battle with this serpent that lives in this fire chamber, and he overcomes this serpent, this Naga, presumably. And these matted head ascetics are so impressed that they pledge themselves to following the Buddha. These are wild people. They're not your sort of middle class cake eating Buddhists we know nowadays. And there's three tribes of them. There's a tribe of 200, 300, and 400, I think. And interestingly, they're all I've forgotten the name of them, but they're all headed by Kashyapa, all by a leader called Kashyapa. There's 3 different Kashyapas, and they all join the Buddha. So the Buddha's got 1,000 disciples at this point, and they're not all enlightened, but they're all just sort of like followers of the Buddha. And he spends some weeks teaching them, presumably the basics of the Dharma. This would be like, in a way, the foundation course, study groups. Gives them the foundations of the Dharma. And then he says to them, go now and let not any 2 of my disciples go the same way. Go now and let not any 2 of my disciples go the same way. So these disciples of his go out 1,000 different ways. And presumably what they do is they go and set up outside of a village or a town or live in a cave, and they, in a way, start Sanghas. It's like the first Buddhist centres, effectively. Yeah? So the followers of the Buddha going out and starting little Sanghas. Yeah? And that is how, in a way, the Buddha starts, the Buddha's teaching transmits itself. Over the years that follow, the centuries and millennia that follows it, at some point, ends up being the religion of nearly a quarter of the population of the world. But that's the point where it really starts to expand. And so, but it's also, it's not just the Buddha's teaching. What's happening is that these disciples, they take responsibility for people. They're taking responsibility for training people and befriending them and caring for them and supporting them in their own practice. So in a way, they're taking this lineage of responsibility. They're taking responsibility for others, for Sanghas. And so obviously I've been reflecting on what it is to be a chair. Why did I do this? Why did I do this? I've been just been on a retreat and on a meeting prior to that. And the meeting was a meeting of chairs in Europe. So every 6 months, all the chairs of the retreat out in Buddhist centres in Europe get together, and we do a bit of Dharma practice, we do a bit of business, we do a bit of spending time together. Prajangosha was there for this last one, got to introduce him, which is very nice. And there was a talk by Viryanaga on this particular one. And we've been exploring chair as different archetypes, and there was a particular archetype I just want to tell you about, one of the archetypes. So he was presenting a sutta. In fact, it's called the Origin Sutta. It's like in a way, it's a bit like the Buddhist creation myth, if you like. I mean, it's to be taken metaphorically rather than literally. But it sort of describes the arising of humans, of mankind. And it said that there was these devas, these gods, presumably like lesser gods, but they came down and started to enjoy the kind of worldly pleasures, the sensual pleasures. So they started eating delicious fruit and drinking the refreshing waters. And then they discovered physical contact, and they invented sex. They got interested in one another, and they started to settle themselves down. They started to build houses. And gradually, as they indulge in these sensual pleasures, they find their bodies, which were made of light and in a way beautiful beings, gradually become coarser and more corporeal, more material. And as they settle themselves down and they start to have possessions, things like the poisons start to arise. So things like greed, things like ill will towards others, and in a way delusion as well. Like the awareness of where they came from start to emerge as well. And over time, this obviously leads into more and more unskillful actions, violence, war, conflict, all sorts of things like this. So it becomes very chaotic. But their response to this is to elect an individual, elect a leader, which is they call it the people's choice, or another translation of it is the king of the fields. So someone that can bring order to the chaos, someone that can try to limit the kind of the spread of this chaos and disharmony. And so this talk was particularly on the archetype of chair as monarch, and we've been working through different archetypes like magician and lover and all sorts, but this one is about chair as monarch. And in a way, the monarch is someone that keeps order. They try to keep order, and of course, you can get a tyrannical monarch, can't you? And you can also get a kind of dictator as well. But it's a Dharma monarch is something different, someone who acts out of service, but nevertheless tries to create order. Tries to create some order. And I think an effective monarch, in a way, an effective leader, is able to give confidence and can energize people and can give direction, and also, I think an important part is build cooperation. It's not necessarily leading in that dictatorial way. It doesn't always work. You need people's, particularly when it's the Dharma, you need people's heart needs to be in it as well, if you see what I mean. So a good monarch, I think, is someone that brings those different qualities. And I've been reflecting on this. Like, does this apply to me? Has this applied to me? And in some ways, I think a chair lives out all various different archetypes, or can live out various different archetypes. But I think, the monarch is a kind of obvious one, but it's definitely not been a natural one for me. I think, as Maitreyanara was saying, left to my own devices, I think I'd prefer to be a kind of evil genius, or something like that. It's like I prefer to be in the back row pulling the strings rather than necessarily being up front, if you see what I mean. I can do it if I'm asked, but I'd rather be sort of, in a way I see myself more as a magician archetype, trying to create things out of nowhere, rather than a king. But I think it's, in a way, I think people need it. I think I've come to realise that people do need it. They do need somebody to stand up and say, "Oh no, I know the way. Follow me," if you see what I mean. And I think I do feel like I have been able to do that. But it has made me grow in certain ways, which I'll say more about later. But what's very interesting is I know quite a lot about different Buddhist centres now, both through this meeting and the work that I do. And sometimes now and again, so they all have chairs most of the time, and sometimes somebody tries to, in a way, run a Buddhist centre by a committee, or there was one group in particular that had 4 co-chairs, and they called themselves the chair's legs. But interestingly, what happens is that you see them and they talk about how good an idea this is, and then next time you see them, they say, "Oh no, it didn't work," and someone stepped forward or someone stepped up to do it. So it does seem as though when you create a Sangha like this, it does seem to need somebody at least to be willing to stand up and say, "I know the way, follow me." So I think I've tried to do that. I've been willing to do that, at least in terms of being a servant of the Dharma, if you say, which I'll say a bit more about. But it's that I think is my first archetype, chair as monarch. Now the other thing is that it's nice that Maitreyanara, in a way, evoked my ordination. That was very good, because I did do that. I was sitting there, I was on this 4-month retreat, and I planned for a lot of it. I planned about what I would do when I got home, because I can't help it. That's just how I feel. And I've always been really inspired by sharing the Dharma. Just like Maitreyanara was saying, it really did save me. I really do feel like that. It really did save me. And so I wanted to offer that to other people. I wanted to make sure everyone had the option of having a gateway. Everyone had the opportunity to follow the Dharma path if they wanted to. And we don't have enough gateways. We don't have enough Buddhist centres to do that yet. So I really wanted to do that. And there's a phrase for this in Buddhism, or a bit of jargon. It's called the Bodhisattva ideal, wanting to alleviate the suffering of all beings. So I've always found this really inspiring, and I've really tried to live out of this the best I can. And when at ordination, we have the option to take a meditation practice on an archetypal figure. And the figure that I chose, or rather chose me, was a figure called Avalokiteshvara, which is a pure white being who works for the good of all beings. So works in certain, he sees the suffering of all these beings in all these different realms. And in each realm of suffering, he tries to present the object or the thing that is going to alleviate the suffering of those beings. So, it's an expression of the altruistic dimension. To use the jargon, the altruistic dimension of our going for refuge. So it basically means doing something. Yeah, it basically means doing something, expressing altruistic activity. And I was told, you sometimes get this thing when you're ordained called go and activate your ordination, which basically means go and do something for the good of the Dharma, for the good of people. So I just took that literally. I got home and I thought, right, what can I do? How can I express this going for refuge? How can I help? And I ended up here in Brixton. It took a little while, and I explored a few things, but through a lovely series of sort of circumstances or events that didn't entirely feel under my control, I ended up here. And I feel really, sitting this side of it now, I feel really pleased and proud of what we've achieved. Obviously, I've had a role in that, but it has felt like a team thing as well. People have supported me, and they have been really willing to buy into my vision. They could have just said, no, what you're talking about, we're quite happy, thank you very much. But they really did buy into that, and I feel like we've all been working together. And for me personally, it's not been easy at times, it's been very hard at times, but I feel particularly this year, I feel like really experiencing the blessings of that effort. And it feels it's sitting here and seeing all of you, and I feel very proud of you all. I feel very proud of you all. You're all really good people, and I feel really proud of our community. Actually, it's a really warm and lovely community. So I found that personally very fulfilling, very rewarding, very fulfilling. And I do feel like we've manifested a vision, actually. And I must say, it's not been my vision. It's not been my vision. The vision has been something that has been from something beyond, if you see what I mean. I think I've helped to work out the details of that. I've helped to work out the strategy, maybe. But the vision has definitely been from somewhere beyond. And I do feel like the Sangha we've created here has been a manifestation of that Bodhisattva ideal. Yeah, there has been something of beyond that's come through. And I don't know if you feel this, but I've always believed that there is magic at play in Brixton. The way that things have unfolded doesn't seem entirely like chance or luck, or even something that I or others could have done just with our efforts. It does feel like the way things have panned out, there feels like an element of magic about it. Yeah, that it almost like it was meant to happen, or something wanted to flourish, if you see what I mean. And something feels alive here to me, And so I think the second archetype for me is the archetype of a channel or a conduit. So I think I think I have been able to channel something, or been part of a number of order members which have helped to channel something from beyond, the magic that imbues the spirit of our Sangha. So the second archetype is as a channel or conduit. And then the third is quite an interesting one. It actually comes from Tibetan Nyingma lineage. And so Bhante Sangha actually talks about the four archetypes of the Tantric, Tibetan Buddhism. And they are the Manu, which I'll come back to in a moment, which is literally the lawgiver, the Buddha, the Guru, and the Turtle. So the Buddha is obvious, the Buddha is the ideal. The Guru is like the interpreter, traditionally Paramabandhu, which helps to articulate the Buddha's teachings. And then the Turtle is like a secret hidden teaching, which helps to, which emerges at a time in a certain situation. But the Manu is very interesting. The Manu is like, defined as the lawgiver. And it's an archetype which creates stability. It creates, Bhante talks about it in terms of cultural development. He used to create cultural development. And he talked about these in a famous talk that he gave on Paramabandhu Day at the LBC in 1976. It's a remarkable talk. I'd really encourage you to check it out. And interestingly, Bhante says that the Buddha cannot arise until the ground is prepared. So the role of the Manu the archetypal Manu is to prepare the ground for the Buddha to arise, prepare the conditions for a Buddha to arise. And he talks about, I don't know if you know Dr. Ambedkar, he talks about Dr. Ambedkar, who's part of, was the Indian law minister who particularly advocated for supporting the Dalit ex-untouchable communities in India who were very discriminated against. So he enshrined laws to help them achieve, there's still discrimination, but less discrimination nowadays. But he converted with his followers to Buddhism and then suddenly died. And Sangha was there to, in a way, help pick up some of the pieces of that. But in a way, he instigated a great conversion back to Buddhism in India amongst the untouchables. But so Sangha talks about Ambedkar as a modern day Manu, like a lawgiver, a law creator. And obviously to a lesser degree, I think in a way there is an element of that in all Dharma teachers. Bhante talks about, he's got in What is the Sangha, he's got this teaching of groups. We very much, in our world, we have positive groups and we have negative groups. And negative groups are understandable, they're groups which cause us to, perpetuate unskillful activity. But there's also positive groups, positive groups which are supportive of skillful action and spiritual development. And to some degree, a Sangha is a positive group, it is a positive group. And out of that, Bhante then goes further and says what we need to do then is become true individuals. But we need a foundation in a positive group. And so actually much of our work as Dharma teachers is often about creating a positive group. I wrote in every year I write a chairs report for our annual report. And a couple of years ago, it may have even been last year, I talked about how I felt Brixton here had gone from being, I think it's always been a positive group, but it's been a small positive group to being an extremely positive group, to actually feeling as though certain individuals within our community were starting to really emerge as substantial spiritual practitioners in their own right. So, feeling as though we've created that context, we've done that work of the Manu. So my third archetype is as a Manu, in a way, as somebody that's been able to create foundations and provide structure and for other people, in a way, create a context for people. And this one, I think, actually has suited my skills rather well, suited my talents rather well. I think I've had a disposition towards this organisation foundational. And I came to, during one of my visits, I got invited to lovely volunteers there at Prajangosha. And he was sitting on the floor and he was playing auto harp and everyone was sitting around watching. And I had a real vision. I thought, oh yes, I've been able to sort of create a foundation here, I've been able to put in some substance, some solid ground here. And I really felt as though Prajangosha should be able to build on top of that, If we're using the metaphor of temple, I feel like I've put in the reception area and the toilets and the ground floor, and he might be able to build a beautiful temple on the top, So I feel like, I really hope he does do that, So that's my third archetype, is in a way a foundation builder, the Manu. So all these three archetypes, I've really kind of seen this responsibility as chair as a spiritual practice. It's always been a spiritual practice for me. It hasn't just been a sort of an annoying organisational thing I had to do alongside trying to meditate and so on. It's asked a lot of me, and in some ways I think it was the only spiritual path that would have worked for me at this point. I came in with so much energy and drive, even some ambition, that it needed refining. It needed refining in the context of altruistic activity. So, having to work, when I work for you, or work for the Dharma, work for the Bodhicitta, has been a really important spiritual path for me, actually. So I think this lineage of responsibility is an entire spiritual path of its own right. And there's this very interesting sutta in the Jataka tables. So it's not Pali Canon, but it's in the Jataka tables, which lists 10 qualities of the Dasa Dharma Raja. So the Dharma, like a Dharma king, or basically a leader, Dharma leader. And they're really interesting, actually. The 10 qualities that a good Dharma leader should manifest. And I found this list really interesting. So I'll just read them to you. So being liberal, ethical uprightness, altruism, trustworthiness and integrity, softness, which I found really interesting, intensity of practice, or literally heat, the word is heat, emotional control, acting with love, tolerance and patience, and avoiding making obstructions. So this was given during that presentation that Prabhupada was offering at the chairs meeting. And while I was sitting there, while I was talking, I have I grown in these areas actually? Have I grown in these areas? And I thought, yes, every single one of these areas I can absolutely say I've grown in. And some of them I feel I naturally already had some ability in them, and some of them I really wasn't good at all. And I've been forced to grow. I've been forced to grow in these areas in order to be in a chair, in order to help to manifest something of that magic here in Brixton, actually. And I think my friends have seen that as well, because we have a lovely tradition of rejoicing one another here in Tribhuvan. And the rejoicings I used to get like 7 years ago were about my drive and energy, and my virya and my vision and all the rest of it. And the ones I get now, I'm really interested in like how good communicator I am, or how soft I am, how patient I am. So something's changed. My friends have seen me develop, and I think it would be fair to say my friends would say they were never natural strengths of mine. So I've been forced to grow in these areas actually. And it hasn't always been easy. But I guess I've kept on, and people have often told me to keep on relaxing and doing less, but I've never been completely convinced of that. So I just kept on going. And I came across this lovely quote from Bante actually, given on a chair seminar he gave in 1981. There's probably about 10 chairs then, rather than like the 85 or 100 we have now. But he said, if you feel like it's too much work, take on more. It makes you work you really want to be doing. And the only thing I'd add to that is I would just add a little extra, which is make sure it's work that you choose to do out of love. Make sure it's work you choose to do out of love. So I've tried to do it wholeheartedly. I've tried to do this wholeheartedly. I've tried to do this through, in a way, trying to manifest something of that bodhisattva ideal. And it's been really rewarding for me as well. And just sort of thank you for all the support and kindness and care and all the work. And people work so hard here. So I couldn't have, well, we couldn't have done it without each other, could we? So thank you to everybody. The responsibility of the chair. Of course, there's, it's all some organisation. There's some work. There's some of it is organisation. You can't get away from that. Some of it is being responsible for people, taking care of people, trying to give people what they need, whatever that is, even if it's to tell them that they should go do something else. Taking responsibility for people. But I also think there is a responsibility to pass on this lineage, pass on the lineage of, all of them actually, but also the lineage of responsibility. And I'm very keen. I'm delighted to pass that on to Prajangosha, actually, this particular lineage. And so when I became chair, when I took over from Sudaka, I felt very strongly that I would like us to have an object which represents this lineage. And sometimes have the tradition of passing an object down through chair to chair to chair, and we didn't have one. So I actually asked Paramabandhu if he would, as our president, we newly established him as president, whether he would donate or buy an object that could be the chair's object. And so he very kindly donated this object. So this is a Vajra, so it's a symbolic Buddhist object representing a thunderbolt. But this particular Vajra has a really nice story behind it. So Paramabandhu was one of my first order member friends. He was also not only my teacher, my preceptor, but he was also my study group leader. So he led my Dharma studies, an excellent study group leader. So if you ever get a chance to go to study with Paramabandhu, do so. And at the end of our 4 years of study together, our group gathered up some money to buy a collection of gifts for Paramabandhu, and one of the gifts was this Vajra. And so, it's come out of, in a way, our appreciation for Paramabandhu. So to get it given back in this symbolic way was really meaningful. And then before I took up a chair, so Sudhakar and I agreed that we'd have a longer handover as well. So it was clear that I was going to become a chair, take over from Sudhakar for some time before. And before I took up that responsibility, I went to see Bhante. So he was about 9 months to a year before he died. I went to meet Bhante. I met him once before, but I only met him twice before he died. And I, in a way, went to him just to ask for his blessing, effectively. And we had a chat. It was very interesting. He was asking about other religious communities and our relationship with those religious communities and were we doing enough. And then he wanted to know more about Brixton. And he's very interested. Even in his old age, he had a real finger on the pulse. He wanted to know what was going on and how it was going. And I said, yes, Bhante, it's going very well. And we've got these courses and these people coming on and there's lots of energy around. And that was very good. And we spoke for a while. And then at the end, I said, I've come to ask for your blessing. I'm about to take up the chair of being Brixton. And we have a chair's object, and I wondered if he'd bless it for us. And so I gave him the Vajra, and he said he'd be happy to, so I gave him this Vajra. And he just sat with it in silence, so it must have been a couple of minutes actually. And they just held it and for quite some time. And then he said to me, oh, I really would have liked to have come to Brixton, but I can't. But I don't need to because I've got you there. So in that moment, I felt like I had his blessing. I had his blessing to become chair. It's very significant meeting for me. So this object is blessed. It's blessed. It represents Bhante's blessing for our Sangha. It represents a blessing for the chair. And it's going to be my pleasure to, in a way, pass this on to Prajangosha for the next phase. So this is the blessed Bhante Vajra. And I'll just say a little bit about what an honour it is to hand over to Prajangosha. Actually, me and Prajangosha were not quite contemporaries of the London Buddhist Centre. We didn't quite overlap, but I must say, having worked with him closely, particularly over the last year, I've really, not only is he a lovely man, he's much more personable and friendly than I could ever be. Seeing him converse with taxi drivers and all sorts, it's remarkable, really. But I think he'll bring something really amazing, really substantial to the Sangha that in a way I couldn't quite do. But also, I've really come to trust his vision. He's got a lot of integrity and he's got a lot of vision as well. So, go easy on him. It takes a little while to settle in, but I think when he comes into his own as the chair, I think it will be really impressive chair as well. So it's a real absolute honour and delight to hand over to him. Okay, so I just wanted to finish with, I'm actually going to read a poem. Paramabandhu might find a shock actually, not known for my love of poetry, but excuse the poem as well, but I just wanted to read one of Bhante's poems, and it was one that I particularly resonated with me when I was on the ordination trip, and captured something I think of, the spirit of the movement, and then I'll end after that. So this is the wind. A wind was in my sails, it blew, stronger and fiercer hour by hour. I did not know from whence it came, or why, I only knew its power. Sometimes it dashed me on the rocks, sometimes it spun me round and round, Sometimes I laughed aloud for joy. Sometimes I felt a peace profound. It drove me on, that manic wind. When I was young, it drives me still. Now I am old. It lives within me. Its breath, my breath. Its will, my will.